The planet was quiet. Too quiet. The sky above stretched endlessly, a dull gray filled with swirling clouds that never seemed to break. Below, the ground was cracked and barren, littered with the remains of battles long fought. Humanity had come to this distant world seeking refuge, but instead, they found themselves locked in a desperate struggle for survival against an alien species known as the Vorthax. These creatures were relentless, their numbers vast, their tactics brutal. For years, humanity had been pushed back, losing ground, resources, and hope. New Haven, one of the last human outposts, stood as a fragile beacon of resistance. It wasn't much, just a cluster of prefabricated buildings surrounded by high walls reinforced with scrap metal. But it was home to what remained of Earth's scattered survivors. Inside its walls, people worked tirelessly to keep the outpost running, repairing equipment, growing food in hydroponic gardens, and preparing for the next inevitable attack. Despite their efforts, morale was low, supplies were dwindling, and the Vorthax showed no signs of slowing down. In the heart of New Haven, tucked away in a small, dimly lit lab, Dr. Emily Carter sat hunched over a glowing screen. Her dark hair was tied back in a messy bun, and her glasses rested precariously on the edge of her nose. She scrolled through lines of ancient data, her eyes narrowing as she deciphered the fragmented information. Emily wasn't a soldier or a strategist. She was a xenobiologist, someone who studied life forms from other planets. But lately, her focus had shifted to something far closer to home: Earth's past. Emily had always been fascinated by history, especially the stories of animals that once roamed the planet before humans drove them to extinction. Mammoths, saber-toothed, tigers, giant sloths. These creatures had been larger than life, ruling ecosystems long before humanity even existed. Now, buried deep within the archives recovered during a recent expedition to an abandoned research facility, Emily had stumbled upon something extraordinary: genetic blueprints of these extinct animals, detailed enough to recreate them. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as she leaned back in her chair, letting out a slow breath. Could it be possible? Could humanity bring these creatures back to life? And if so, what would that mean for their fight against the Vorthax? The idea was both thrilling and terrifying. She knew she couldn't do it alone, but she also knew she couldn't keep this discovery to herself. Standing up, Emily grabbed a tablet and headed toward the command center. Captain Ryan Hayes was there, as he usually was, poring over maps and reports with a furrowed brow. Ryan was a tall man with short brown hair and sharp features, his face etched with the weight of leadership. He looked up as Emily entered, his expression softening slightly when he saw her. "Dr. Carter," he said, nodding. "What brings you here?" "I think I found something," Emily replied, holding up the tablet. "Something that might help us." Ryan gestured for her to sit, and she did, placing the tablet on the table between them. She quickly explained what she had discovered: the genetic data, the potential to revive extinct animals, and how they could be trained to aid in battle. As she spoke, Ryan's expression shifted from skepticism to cautious interest. "You're talking about bringing back predators," he said finally. "Big ones. Dangerous ones." "Yes," Emily admitted. "But think about it. These creatures were apex hunters. They were built for combat, for survival. If we can control them, train them, they could give us an edge we desperately need." Ryan leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. The risks were clear. Bringing back such powerful animals could easily backfire, putting everyone at New Haven in danger. But the potential rewards were undeniable. Humanity was losing this war, and unconventional solutions were becoming their only options. "All right," Ryan said after a moment. "You have my permission to proceed, but under strict conditions. You'll work with a team and everything will be monitored closely. If things go wrong, we pull the plug immediately." Emily nodded, relief washing over her. "Thank you, Captain. You won't regret this." Over the next few days, Emily assembled a small team to assist her. First was Aaron Brooks, a tech specialist with a knack for engineering and programming. His wiry frame and quick wit made him invaluable when it came to troubleshooting equipment. Then there was Lisa Harper, a field medic with a calm demeanor and steady hands. Though she wasn't a scientist, Lisa's medical expertise would prove crucial in monitoring the health of the revived animals. Together, they set up a secure lab in one of the outpost's unused storage units. It wasn't ideal, but it would have to do. Using advanced cloning techniques and synthetic biology, they began the painstaking process of reviving the first batch of animals. They started small, choosing less dangerous species like the woolly mammoth to test the viability of the process. The mammoth's DNA was surprisingly intact, and within weeks, the first embryo began to grow in an artificial womb. As the days turned into weeks, excitement grew among the team. When the mammoth calf finally emerged, blinking and unsteady on its massive legs, the entire room erupted into cheers. It was a living, breathing piece of Earth's history, brought back to life in a time of dire need. Emily watched as the creature took its first steps, her heart swelling with pride. But not everything went smoothly. Reviving the mammoth was just the beginning. The team soon moved on to more aggressive species, like the dire wolf and velociraptor. These animals were intelligent, adaptable, and fiercely territorial. Training them required patience and creativity, often involving virtual simulations designed by Aaron to mimic real-world scenarios. Slowly but surely, the animals began to respond, learning commands and forming bonds with their handlers. However, progress came with setbacks. One evening, during a routine check, a power outage caused by a malfunctioning generator led to disaster. A raptor, still adjusting to its new environment, managed to escape containment. Panic spread through the lab as alarms blared, and the creature darted into the corridors of New Haven. It moved with terrifying speed, its claws clicking against the metal floors as it searched for a way out. Aaron and Lisa sprang into action, working together to corner the raptor, while Emily tried to calm it using vocal cues they had practiced during training. Ryan arrived moments later, armed and ready to intervene if necessary. Tensions ran high as the animal snarled, its sharp teeth glinting in the dim light. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Emily managed to establish eye contact with the raptor, speaking softly until it relaxed enough for Lisa to sedate it. The incident left everyone shaken. Several personnel had been injured during the chaos, and questions arose about the safety of continuing the project. Ryan called an emergency meeting to discuss the future of the program. Some argued that the risks outweighed the benefits, while others insisted that the potential advantages were worth pursuing. In the end, Ryan made the call to continue, but with stricter protocols in place. Despite the challenges, the team pressed on. Each success brought them closer to their goal, each failure teaching them valuable lessons. Emily spent countless hours observing the animals, marveling at their intelligence and adaptability. She began to see them not just as tools for war, but as living beings with instincts and emotions all their own. One day, while feeding the dire wolves, Emily noticed something remarkable. One of the wolves seemed to recognize her, wagging its tail slightly as she approached. It was a small gesture, but it meant the world to her. These creatures weren't just weapons. They were partners, allies in humanity's darkest hour. As the first phase of the project neared completion, preparations began for the next step: deployment. The animals would soon face their greatest test yet, not in a lab or a simulation, but on the battlefield. The thought weighed heavily on everyone involved, but they knew there was no turning back now. Humanity's fate rested not only in their hands but also in the paws, claws, and hooves of creatures long forgotten by time. And so, amidst the uncertainty and fear, a spark of hope flickered to life. Perhaps, just perhaps, the past held the key to humanity's future. The lab buzzed with activity as Emily and her team prepared for the next phase of their groundbreaking project. The woolly mammoth calf, now several weeks old, had grown stronger and more confident. It lumbered around its enclosure, its massive tusks gleaming under the artificial lights. Nearby, a pack of dire wolves rested in a separate pen, their golden eyes watching every movement with sharp intelligence. Even the raptors, though still unpredictable, seemed to be learning the boundaries of their new world. Emily stood at the center of it all, her clipboard in hand, jotting down notes as she observed each animal's behavior. She couldn't help but feel a mix of pride and apprehension. These creatures were no longer just data on a screen or fragments of DNA. They were alive, breathing, and growing stronger every day. But they were also dangerous, and Emily knew that one wrong move could spell disaster for everyone at New Haven. Aaron Brooks was busy at his workstation, tinkering with a holographic simulation program he had designed, specifically for training the animals. The program projected lifelike scenarios onto the walls of the lab, creating virtual environments where the animals could practice responding to commands. For the wolves, the simulations included hunting drills and defensive maneuvers. For the raptors, the focus was on agility and stealth. Aaron had spent countless hours fine-tuning the system, ensuring it would challenge the animals without overwhelming them. "Hey, Doc," Aaron called out, interrupting Emily's thoughts. "You might want to see this." Emily walked over to his station, peering at the screen. On it, a dire wolf was navigating a simulated forest, leaping over fallen logs and weaving between trees. The wolf moved with surprising grace, its movements fluid and precise. Emily smiled, impressed by how far the animals had come in such a short time. "That's incredible," she said. "They're adapting faster than I expected." "Yeah, well, they're not exactly your average pets," Aaron replied with a grin. "Still, progress is progress. We just need to keep pushing them." Lisa Harper joined them a moment later, carrying a tray of medical supplies. She had been monitoring the health of the animals closely, ensuring they were adjusting well to their new environment. Her calm demeanor made her a natural fit for the role, and the animals seemed to trust her almost instinctively. "How are they holding up?" Emily asked. "Good so far," Lisa replied. "The mammoth's growth rate is normal, and the wolves seem healthy. The raptors are another story. They're still showing signs of stress. I think they miss open spaces." Emily nodded thoughtfully. The raptors were the most challenging of the group, their instincts driving them to hunt and explore. Keeping them contained in a lab setting was difficult, but necessary for now. She made a mental note to discuss possible solutions with Ryan later. Despite the progress, tensions within the outpost were rising. Word of the revived animals had spread quickly, and not everyone was thrilled about the idea. Some soldiers saw the creatures as valuable allies, while others viewed them as ticking time bombs waiting to go off. A few even whispered about abandoning the project altogether, fearing the risks outweighed the potential rewards. Captain Ryan Hayes was caught in the middle of it all. As the leader of New Haven, he bore the weight of every decision, and this one was no exception. He understood the concerns of his people, but he also recognized the importance of finding new ways to fight back against the Vorthax. Humanity was losing ground fast, and unconventional solutions were becoming their only options. One evening, Ryan called a meeting with Emily and her team to discuss the next steps. They gathered in the command center, the air thick with anticipation. Ryan wasted no time getting to the point. "We've made good progress," he began, pacing slowly as he spoke. "But we can't afford any more mistakes. The last incident with the raptor escaping cost us resources and injured several personnel. If we're going to move forward, we need to prove that these animals are worth the risk." Emily nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "I agree," she said, "which is why I propose we test them in a controlled mission. Something small, but significant enough to demonstrate their value." Ryan raised an eyebrow. "What do you have in mind?" "There's an abandoned supply depot about 20 miles from here," Emily explained. "It's overrun with Vorthax scouts, but if we can reclaim it, we'll gain access to critical resources: food, ammunition, maybe even fuel. The animals could help us clear the area quickly and efficiently." Ryan considered her proposal, weighing the risks and benefits. It was a bold plan, but it could work. If successful, it would not only secure much-needed supplies, but also silence the critics who doubted the project. "All right," Ryan said finally. "We'll do it. But we'll need a solid strategy, and everyone involved has to be prepared for anything." Over the next few days, the team worked tirelessly to prepare for the mission. Emily focused on selecting which animals would participate and ensuring they were ready for combat. The dire wolves were chosen for their speed and teamwork, while the raptors were selected for their stealth and precision. The mammoth, though too large and slow for direct engagement, would serve as a mobile shield, protecting the human soldiers as they advanced. Aaron spent hours refining the training simulations, adding new challenges to better mimic the conditions they would face in the field. Lisa double-checked the animals' health, administering sedatives and painkillers as needed to keep them calm during transport. Meanwhile, Ryan assembled a squad of soldiers to accompany the animals, including sniper Megan Lewis and engineer Jason Cole. Megan was a quiet woman with sharp eyes and steady hands. She had earned a reputation for her accuracy, often taking out multiple targets before they even realized she was there. Jason, on the other hand, was a problem solver, skilled at improvising solutions under pressure. Together, they formed a formidable team, ready to support the animals in any way they could. Finally, the day of the mission arrived. The animals were loaded onto specially designed carriers and transported to the outskirts of the depot under the cover of darkness. The journey was tense, with everyone on edge, knowing that failure could mean disaster. When they reached their destination, Emily gave each handler a final briefing, reminding them of their roles and responsibilities. As dawn broke, the operation began. The dire wolves led the charge, darting into the depot with unmatched speed. Their sudden appearance sent the Vorthax scouts scattering, their ranks breaking as panic set in. The raptors followed close behind, slipping through the chaos like shadows, targeting isolated enemies with lethal precision. The mammoth lumbered forward, its sheer size forcing the remaining Vorthax to retreat. Behind it, the human soldiers moved in, securing key areas and gathering supplies. Megan perched atop a nearby ridge, picking off stragglers with her rifle, while Jason worked to disable traps and fortify positions. For a moment, everything seemed to be going according to plan. The animals performed admirably, their instincts guiding them with uncanny accuracy. But then, unexpectedly, reinforcements arrived. A second wave of Vorthax emerged from the surrounding terrain, their numbers far greater than anticipated. The situation grew chaotic. The dire wolves fought valiantly, but they were outnumbered. One of the raptors took a hit, its leg injured as it tried to evade enemy fire. Emily's heart sank as she watched the creature struggle, but there was no time to dwell on it. She signaled for the mammoth to create a barrier, buying the humans time to regroup. Ryan barked orders, directing his soldiers to fall back to a defensible position. Megan continued to provide covering fire, her shots ringing out like thunder. Jason rigged explosives along the perimeter, creating makeshift barriers to slow the advancing Vorthax. Meanwhile, Emily and her team worked to stabilize the injured raptor, doing whatever they could to keep it alive. Just when it seemed like all hope was lost, the tide turned. The mammoth let out a deafening roar, charging headlong into the enemy ranks. Its sheer force scattered the Vorthax, giving the dire wolves and remaining raptors an opening to strike. With renewed determination, the animals pressed forward, their combined efforts finally tipping the balance in humanity's favor. By the time the dust settled, the depot was secure. Supplies were salvaged, and the surviving Vorthax had fled. Though battered and bruised, the team emerged victorious, their faith in the revived animals restored. Emily knelt beside the injured raptor, stroking its scaly head as Lisa tended to its wounds. Despite everything, the creature had fought bravely, proving its worth in the heat of battle. As they returned to New Haven, the mood was somber yet triumphant. The mission had been costly, but it had also demonstrated the potential of the revived animals. For the first time in months, there was a glimmer of hope, a belief that perhaps, just perhaps, humanity could turn the tide against the Vorthax. And, deep down, Emily knew that this was only the beginning. The victory at the supply depot had given the people of New Haven a much-needed boost. For the first time in months, smiles returned to faces, and conversations buzzed with optimism. The success of the revived animals in battle was undeniable, and even those who had doubted the project began to see its potential. But for Emily Carter and her team, there was no time to rest. The mission had proven that the animals could be effective allies, but it had also revealed their vulnerabilities. If they were going to continue using these creatures in combat, they needed to strengthen the bond between humans and animals. And fast. Back at the lab, Emily spent hours observing the animals, trying to understand them better. She noticed how the dire wolves seemed to trust certain handlers more than others, responding eagerly to their commands. The raptors, though still unpredictable, appeared to form attachments too, especially to Lisa Harper, who had nursed the injured raptor back to health. Even the mammoth, massive and seemingly indifferent, would often follow Aaron Brooks around like a curious puppy when he worked on equipment nearby. One day, as Emily watched Shadow, the raptor that had been injured during the mission, she realized something important. These animals weren't just tools or weapons, they were intelligent beings capable of forming connections. The key to controlling them wasn't dominance but partnership. It was a realization that changed everything about how she approached the project. "Lisa," Emily said one afternoon as they stood near Shadow's enclosure, "do you think you could spend more time with her? Maybe try training her yourself?" Lisa hesitated for a moment, glancing at the sleek, predatory creature. "You really think she'll listen to me?" "I know she will," Emily replied confidently. "She already trusts you because you helped her when she was hurt. That's a bond we can build on." With some encouragement, Lisa agreed to take the lead in working with Shadow. At first it was slow going. The raptor was cautious, her sharp eyes watching every move Lisa made. But over time, Lisa's patience paid off. She brought small treats, chunks of protein-rich food, and spoke softly as she rewarded Shadow for following simple commands. Soon the raptor began responding more readily, even allowing Lisa to touch her scaly hide without flinching. Aaron noticed similar progress with the dire wolves. He started spending extra time with them, tossing balls and running drills designed to mimic hunting behaviors. The wolves loved the games, their tails wagging as they chased after targets. Through play, Aaron discovered that the wolves were incredibly loyal once they formed a connection with a handler. They would follow him anywhere, their instincts aligning perfectly with his directions. Even the mammoth, which had seemed so aloof at first, began showing signs of affection, or at least recognition. When Aaron walked by, it would trumpet loudly, its trunk reaching out to nudge him gently. Emily couldn't help but laugh at the sight. The giant creature looked almost comical, behaving like a playful child, despite its enormous size. As the bonds between humans and animals grew stronger, so did the sense of camaraderie within the team. Emily, Aaron, and Lisa worked together seamlessly, their shared goal uniting them in ways they hadn't expected. Late nights in the lab turned into lively discussions about strategy and tactics, while early mornings became opportunities to test new ideas. The stress of the project never fully disappeared, but it felt lighter somehow, carried by the growing confidence they all shared. Meanwhile, Captain Ryan Hayes kept a close eye on the program. Though he supported it, he remained cautious, knowing that failure could have dire consequences. He visited the lab regularly, checking in with Emily and her team to ensure everything was proceeding as planned. Each time he left impressed by their dedication and by the progress they were making. "They're not just animals anymore," Ryan remarked one evening as he watched the dire wolves practice their formations. "They're soldiers, just like us." Emily nodded, her gaze fixed on the wolves as they moved in perfect harmony. "That's exactly what I've been thinking. They're part of our team now." But not everyone shared Ryan's enthusiasm. Some members of the outpost still harbored doubts about the revived animals, fearing what might happen if the Vorthax discovered the program. Others worried about the ethical implications of reviving extinct species, only to send them into battle. These concerns came to a head during a heated meeting in the command center. "We're playing God here," one officer shouted, slamming his fist on the table. "These creatures didn't ask to be brought back to life, and now we're sending them to die for us." "It's not about asking permission," Ryan countered firmly. "It's about survival. If we don't use every advantage we have, we'll lose this war, and then none of this will matter." The argument went on for hours, with voices rising and tempers flaring, In the end, Ryan managed to quell the dissent, reminding everyone that the animals had already proven their worth. Still, the debate lingered in the air, casting a shadow over the celebrations of their recent victory. Despite the controversy, preparations continued for future missions. Emily proposed expanding the program, suggesting they revive more dangerous species to complement the existing lineup. Her suggestion sparked both excitement and unease among the team. While the idea of adding larger, more powerful animals to their arsenal was appealing, it also raised concerns about control and safety. After careful consideration, Emily decided to focus on reviving the Megalania, a massive monitor lizard thought to have lived millions of years ago. Known for its size and ferocity, the Megalania was a predator unlike any other, capable of taking down prey much larger than itself. If they could bring it back, it could serve as a formidable weapon against the Vorthax. Reviving the Megalania proved to be a daunting task. Its DNA was fragmented, requiring extensive repairs and modifications before cloning could begin. Emily and Aaron worked tirelessly, piecing together the genetic code bit by bit. Meanwhile, Lisa monitored the process closely, ensuring the embryo developed properly. The stakes were higher than ever, and the pressure weighed heavily on all of them. Finally, after weeks of painstaking effort, the Megalania hatched. It was smaller than expected at first, its scaled body glistening under the lab lights. But as it grew, so did its appetite and its aggression. Unlike the other animals, the Megalania showed little interest in forming bonds with humans. It snapped at anyone who came too close, its forked tongue flicking out as it assessed its surroundings. "This one's going to be tricky," Aaron muttered, standing safely behind a reinforced barrier as the creature prowled its enclosure. "He's not like the others," Emily agreed. "But he's smart. We just need to find a way to reach him." Training the Megalania required a different approach. Instead of relying on affection or play, Emily focused on establishing dominance. She used sound frequencies and visual cues to assert control, gradually teaching the creature to respond to specific signals. It was a slow and often frustrating process, but over time, the Megalania began to obey, if only reluctantly. As the days passed, the team grew more confident in their ability to handle even the most challenging animals. They tested new strategies, refined old ones, and prepared for whatever challenges lay ahead. The bond between humans and animals deepened, becoming something neither side could have anticipated. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Emily found herself standing outside the lab, watching the stars appear one by one. The weight of responsibility rested heavily on her shoulders, but she felt a strange sense of peace. The animals had come from Earth's distant past, yet they had become an integral part of humanity's present, and possibly its future. "They're amazing, aren't they?" Lisa said, joining her a moment later. "Yes," Emily replied softly. "They are." Together they stood in silence, listening to the distant calls of the dire wolves and the heavy footsteps of the mammoth. Somewhere inside the lab, the Megalania let out a low growl, a reminder of the power they had unleashed. But for now, at least, everything was calm, and in that moment, Emily allowed herself to hope, for the first time in a long time, that humanity might stand a chance after all. The days at New Haven passed quickly, filled with both progress and tension. The bond between the humans and the revived animals had grown stronger, but so had the stakes. The Vorthax were relentless, their attacks growing more frequent and more brutal. Every victory came at a cost, and every setback weighed heavily on the survivors. Still, Emily Carter and her team pressed on, knowing that humanity's survival depended on their success. One morning, as Emily walked through the lab, she noticed something unusual. Shadow, the raptor Lisa had been training, was standing near the edge of her enclosure, her golden eyes fixed intently on Lisa. It wasn't aggression or curiosity. It was something else, something deeper. For the first time, Emily saw what could only be described as trust. Shadow no longer flinched when Lisa approached, and she even leaned into Lisa's touch when she scratched the base of her neck. "It's like she knows," Lisa said softly, catching Emily's gaze. Like she understands we're in this together. Emily nodded, feeling a lump form in her throat. These creatures weren't just tools. They were partners, fighting alongside humanity in a war that wasn't theirs to fight. She couldn't help but wonder what they thought of their new world, this strange and dangerous place so different from the one they had once called home. Meanwhile, Aaron Brooks was busy working with the dire wolves. He had devised a new training exercise designed to test their teamwork and coordination. The wolves were split into two groups, each tasked with navigating an obstacle course while avoiding simulated enemy fire. At first, the exercise was chaotic, with the wolves barking and snarling as they jostled for position. But as Aaron repeated the drill, they began to work together, their movements becoming synchronized and precise. "They're learning faster than I expected," Aaron said, his voice tinged with awe as he watched the wolves leap over barriers and weave between obstacles. "It's like they remember how to hunt in packs." "They do," Emily replied. "Their instincts are still there, buried deep inside them. We're just helping them bring it back to the surface." Even the mammoth, which had initially seemed too docile for combat, proved to be a valuable asset. Its sheer size made it an intimidating presence on the battlefield, capable of knocking down walls or creating barriers with its massive body. Aaron had rigged a harness system that allowed soldiers to ride on its back, giving them a mobile platform from which to attack. The mammoth didn't seem to mind the extra weight, its slow but steady gait carrying its human passengers safely through danger zones. But not everything was going smoothly. The megalania, the giant monitor lizard, remained a challenge. Despite Emily and Lisa's efforts, the creature refused to fully submit to their commands. It was intelligent, perhaps too intelligent, and its predatory instincts often clashed with their attempts to control it. One day, during a training session, it lunged at a barrier, shattering it with a single swipe of its powerful tail. Everyone nearby scrambled to safety, their hearts pounding as the creature let out a low guttural growl. "We can't keep pushing him like this," Lisa said later, her hands trembling slightly as she cleaned a cut on her arm. "He's not like the others. He doesn't want to be controlled." "I know," Emily admitted, frustration creeping into her voice. "But we don't have a choice. If we can't figure out how to work with him, all our efforts will be for nothing." Despite the challenges, the team refused to give up. They adjusted their approach, focusing less on dominance and more on mutual respect. Instead of forcing the megalania to obey, they tried rewarding it for cooperation. Slowly, painfully slowly, the creature began to respond. It still snapped at anyone who came too close, but it also started following basic commands, albeit reluctantly. As the weeks went by, the people of New Haven began to see the revived animals as more than just weapons. They were symbols of hope, reminders that humanity still had the ability to adapt and survive. Soldiers who had once been wary of the creatures now greeted them warmly, offering scraps of food or patting their sides as they passed. Even Captain Ryan Hayes, who had initially been skeptical of the project, found himself drawn to the animals' strength and resilience. "They remind me of us," Ryan said one evening as he stood outside the lab, watching the dire wolves playfully chase after a ball. "They've been brought back from extinction just like we're trying to bring ourselves back from the brink." Emily smiled, understanding exactly what he meant. The animals were fighters, just like the humans they had come to rely on. Together, they formed a bond that transcended species, united by a shared goal: survival. But the peace didn't last long. One night as the outpost slept, disaster struck. A spy embedded within New Haven, a man named Kyle, who had posed as a mechanic, managed to infiltrate the lab. Using stolen codes, he accessed the security system and disabled the alarms. Then, under the cover of darkness, he slipped into the animal enclosures, planting small devices designed to disrupt the creature's behavior. By morning, the damage was done. The dire wolves were restless, pacing back and forth in their pens with agitated growls. The raptors hissed and snapped at each other, their usual camaraderie replaced by hostility. Even the mammoth seemed uneasy, its trunk swinging wildly as it stomped around its enclosure. Only the megalania remained calm, though its piercing gaze suggested it was aware of something wrong. "What's happening?" Aaron asked, panic rising in his voice as he rushed into the lab. "Why are they acting like this?" Emily's heart sank as she surveyed the chaos. Something or someone had tampered with the animals. She quickly gathered her team, instructing them to check every corner of the lab for signs of sabotage. It didn't take long to find the devices Kyle had planted. Small and unassuming, they emitted low-frequency signals designed to confuse the animals' instincts. "We need to disable these immediately," Emily said, her voice firm despite the fear coursing through her veins. "If we don't, the animals could turn on us, or each other." Working quickly, the team dismantled the devices one by one. As the interference faded, the animals began to settle down, their natural behaviors returning. But the damage had already been done. The incident served as a grim reminder of how vulnerable the program was, and how easily it could be exploited. Later that day, Ryan called an emergency meeting to address the breach. The mood in the command center was tense, anger and fear simmering beneath the surface. When Kyle was finally caught attempting to escape, he confessed to leaking information about the revived animals to the Vorthax. His betrayal had put everyone at risk, and the consequences were dire. "The Vorthax know about the animals now," Ryan said, his voice heavy with resignation, "which means they'll stop at nothing to destroy them and us." Emily felt a chill run down her spine. The Vorthax were ruthless, their tactics brutal and efficient. If they targeted the lab, the animals wouldn't stand a chance, and without the animals, humanity's chances of survival would plummet. "We need to prepare for the worst," Ryan continued. "Fortify the lab, reinforce the walls, and make sure every handler is ready to defend their animal if necessary." Over the next few days, the entire outpost mobilized. Soldiers took shifts guarding the lab, their weapons trained on any potential threat. Engineers worked tirelessly to strengthen the facility's defenses, adding layers of metal and concrete to the existing structure. Meanwhile, Emily and her team focused on preparing the animals for what was to come. Training sessions became more intense, with the animals practicing evasive maneuvers and defensive formations. The dire wolves learned to form protective circles around their handlers, while the raptors practiced darting in and out of cover to avoid enemy fire. Even the mammoth was trained to use its bulk as a shield, shielding soldiers behind it as it charged forward. Through it all, the bond between humans and animals grew stronger. Handlers spent hours with their assigned creatures, talking to them, playing with them, and reinforcing the trust they had built. Shadow, in particular, seemed to sense Lisa's anxiety, pressing her scaly head against Lisa's chest as if to reassure her. "You'll protect me, won't you?" Lisa whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. Shadow let out a soft chirp, her golden eyes locking onto Lisa's. In that moment, Lisa knew the answer was yes. As the days turned into weeks, the outpost braced for the inevitable. The Vorthax were coming, and when they arrived, the battle would be unlike anything they had faced before. But for the first time in a long time, Emily felt a flicker of hope. The animals were ready, their instincts sharpened, and their loyalty unwavering. Together, humans and beasts stood side by side, united by a shared determination to survive. And as Emily looked out over the lab, watching the dire wolves rest their heads on their paws and the mammoth trumpet softly in the distance, she allowed herself to believe that perhaps, just perhaps, they might actually stand a chance. The night was unusually quiet, the kind of silence that made everyone uneasy. The people of New Haven had grown used to the constant hum of activity, machines running, soldiers training, animals moving in their enclosures. But now, the stillness felt heavy, like a storm waiting to break. Emily Carter sat in the lab, her eyes scanning the monitors that displayed live feeds from the outpost perimeter cameras. She hadn't slept in days, her mind racing with thoughts of what might come next. The Vorthax knew about the revived animals now, thanks to Kyle's betrayal. That knowledge weighed heavily on everyone. The aliens were cunning and relentless, and they wouldn't hesitate to strike at the heart of New Haven. If they managed to destroy the lab, or worse, capture the animals, it would be a devastating blow to humanity's chances of survival. Captain Ryan Hayes had ordered double shifts for the guards, ensuring that every inch of the outpost was covered. Soldiers patrolled the walls, their rifles ready, while engineers reinforced every weak point they could find. Inside the lab, Emily and her team worked tirelessly to prepare the animals for the battle ahead. They trained them harder than ever before, focusing on coordination and defense. But even with all their efforts, fear lingered in the air. Everyone knew the odds were stacked against them. One evening, as Lisa Harper finished feeding Shadow, the raptor nudged her gently with its snout. Lisa smiled despite herself, running her hand along the creature's scaly hide. "You're going to do great," she whispered, though her voice trembled slightly. "Just stay close to me, okay?" Shadow chirped softly, her golden eyes locking onto Lisa's. It was as if the creature understood, as if it knew how much depended on what was coming. Lisa felt a lump form in her throat. She had grown attached to Shadow over the weeks, seeing her not just as an animal but as a partner, a friend. The thought of losing her was unbearable. Aaron Brooks was busy running simulations in his corner of the lab, tweaking the virtual environments to better mimic the chaos of a real battle. He had programmed scenarios involving waves of Vorthax, attackers forcing the dire wolves and raptors to adapt quickly. The wolves performed admirably, their teamwork seamless as they moved in synchronized patterns. The raptors, too, showed remarkable agility, darting between obstacles with precision. Even the mammoth, slow and lumbering as it was, proved to be a valuable asset, using its massive body to shield the smaller creatures when needed. But the megalania remained unpredictable. Despite Emily's best efforts, the giant lizard refused to fully cooperate. It snapped at anyone who came too close, its forked tongue flicking out as it assessed its surroundings. Aaron suggested using sound frequencies to calm it, but the results were mixed at best. Still, Emily refused to give up. She spent hours observing the creature, trying to understand its behavior. "He's not like the others," she muttered, one night as she scribbled notes in her journal. "He's wilder, more independent. Maybe that's why he's so hard to control," Aaron replied, leaning against the edge of her desk. "But if we can figure out how to harness that independence, he could be our most powerful weapon." Emily nodded, her gaze fixed on the monitor showing the megalania prowling its enclosure. There was something about the creature's movements, fluid, deliberate, that gave her hope. It wasn't just brute strength, it was intelligence. If they could tap into that, they might stand a chance. The tension within the outpost reached a breaking point when the first wave of Vorthax scouts appeared on the horizon. Their sleek insect-like forms moved with eerie speed, their glowing eyes scanning the terrain as they advanced. Alarms blared across New Haven, jolting everyone into action. Soldiers rushed to their posts, while handlers prepared the animals for deployment. "This is it," Ryan said grimly as he addressed the team in the command center. "They're testing us. If we hold our ground now, we might buy ourselves some time." Emily felt a chill run down her spine. Time was all they had left, and even that was slipping away. The battle began with a barrage of energy blasts from the Vorthax, targeting the walls and guard towers. The humans fought back fiercely, their weapons firing in steady bursts as they tried to keep the aliens at bay. Meanwhile, the animals waited inside the lab, their handlers standing by nervously. When the order finally came to deploy them, Emily gave each handler a final briefing, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her insides. "Stay close to your animals," she instructed. "They'll protect you if you trust them. And remember, they're counting on you too." The dire wolves were the first to enter the fray, charging through the gates with unrelenting speed. Their presence immediately disrupted the Vorthax ranks, scattering the smaller aliens as they lunged forward with razor-sharp teeth. The raptors followed close behind, darting in and out of the chaos with lethal precision. Each strike was calculated, each movement deliberate. Even the mammoth joined the fight, its massive tusks tearing through enemy lines as it created a path for the human soldiers. For a brief moment, it seemed like they might actually win. The animals were performing exactly as they had been trained, their instincts guiding them with uncanny accuracy. But then, unexpectedly, reinforcements arrived. A second wave of Vorthax emerged from the shadows, their numbers overwhelming. The dire wolves fought valiantly, but they were outnumbered. One by one they fell, their bodies collapsing under the weight of the alien assault. Lisa watched in horror as Shadow leapt into the air, taking down 2 Vorthax with a single swipe of her claws. But before she could retreat, a third alien struck, its weapon piercing the raptor's side. Shadow let out a sharp cry, stumbling backward as blood seeped from the wound. "No," Lisa screamed, rushing toward her without thinking. She didn't care about the danger. All she could see was Shadow lying motionless on the ground. Tears streamed down her face as she knelt beside the creature, pressing her hands against the wound in a desperate attempt to stop the bleeding. "Lisa, get back here!" Ryan shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. But Lisa didn't move. She couldn't leave Shadow, not now, not ever. To everyone's surprise, the injured raptor suddenly stirred. With a low growl, Shadow pushed herself to her feet, her golden eyes blazing with determination. Ignoring her injury, she positioned herself in front of Lisa, shielding her from the advancing Vorthax. Then, with a final burst of energy, she charged forward, taking down as many enemies as she could before collapsing once more. This time, there was no getting up. Shadow lay still, her breathing shallow as Lisa cradled her head in her lap. "Thank you," Lisa whispered, her voice breaking. "Thank you for everything." The loss of Shadow hit everyone hard, but there was no time to mourn. The battle raged on, and the humans were losing ground fast. The mammoth, too, had sustained injuries, its massive body slowing under the weight of multiple attacks. Only the Megalania remained untouched, its predatory instincts keeping it alive amidst the chaos. Seeing no other option, Emily made a desperate decision. She signaled for the Megalania to be released, knowing full well the risks involved. The giant lizard emerged from its enclosure with terrifying speed, its jaws snapping shut around anything that came too close. For a moment it seemed like the tide might turn. The Megalania tore through the Vorthax ranks, its sheer size and ferocity unmatched. But victory came at a cost. As the Megalania rampaged through the battlefield, it became clear that controlling it was nearly impossible. Handlers shouted commands, but the creature ignored them, driven by instinct alone. In its frenzy, it accidentally struck down several human soldiers, adding to the growing list of casualties. By the time the dust settled, the outpost was in ruins. Bodies littered the ground, both human and alien. The dire wolves were gone, their sacrifice ensuring that the humans had a fighting chance. The mammoth lay motionless near the gates, its massive form a testament to its bravery. And Shadow was gone, her memory etched forever in Lisa's heart. Emily stood amid the wreckage, her body trembling with exhaustion and grief. She had believed in this project, had poured every ounce of her energy into making it work. But now, staring at the devastation around her, she wondered if it had all been worth it. Ryan approached her slowly, placing a hand on her shoulder. "We held them off," he said quietly. "That's something." Emily nodded, though her mind was elsewhere. The animals had given everything, and so had the humans, but at what cost? And what did the future hold now that their greatest weapon was gone? As the survivors began to regroup, Emily made a silent vow. She would honor the sacrifices made that day, not just by the humans, but by the animals who had fought alongside them. Whatever happened next, she would ensure that their legacy lived on, because in the end it wasn't just about survival. It was about remembering those who had given everything to make it possible. The aftermath of the battle was a somber affair. The once bustling outpost of New Haven now lay in ruins, its walls scorched and its structures crumbling. The air smelled of smoke and ash, and the ground was littered with debris, shattered weapons, twisted metal, and the remains of both human and alien fighters. Survivors moved silently, their faces pale and drawn as they worked to clean up the wreckage and tend to the wounded. Among them was Emily Carter, her hands trembling as she helped carry supplies from what was left of the medical bay. The loss of Shadow weighed heavily on Lisa Harper, who had barely spoken since the battle ended. She sat alone in a corner of the lab, staring blankly at the floor. Her eyes were red from crying, and her hands still bore faint traces of Shadow's blood. No one knew how to comfort her. Words felt hollow in the face of such grief. Even Aaron Brooks, usually quick with a joke or a reassuring smile, found himself at a loss. He simply placed a hand on Lisa's shoulder before walking away, his own heart heavy with sorrow. Emily tried to focus on the task at hand, but her mind kept drifting back to the animals that had sacrificed everything. The dire wolves, the mammoth, even Shadow, all gone. Only the megalania remained, though it was clear that controlling the creature would be nearly impossible. Its wild instincts had saved them in the heat of battle, but they also made it unpredictable. Still, Emily refused to give up. If humanity was going to survive, they needed every advantage they could get. As the survivors regrouped, Captain Ryan Hayes called a meeting in what was left of the command center. The room was small and cramped, filled with weary faces and hushed voices. Ryan stood at the front, his expression grim but resolute. "We've taken a hit," he began, his voice steady despite the exhaustion etched into his features. "But we're still standing, that means something." No one spoke. The weight of his words hung in the air, a fragile reminder of their resilience, but everyone knew the truth. They couldn't keep fighting like this. The Vorthax were relentless, their numbers seemingly endless. Without a new strategy, humanity's days were numbered. Emily stepped forward, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "We need to finish what we started," she said, her voice firm despite the tremor beneath it. "The animals gave us a chance to fight back, and we can't let their sacrifice be in vain. There's one more creature we haven't revived yet, the Titanoboa." A murmur rippled through the room. The Titanoboa was an ancient snake, massive and terrifying, capable of swallowing prey whole. It was a predator, unlike any other, and reviving. It came with enormous risks, but Emily believed it might be their only hope. "The Titanoboa could turn the tide," she continued. "Its size and strength make it nearly unstoppable. If we can control it, we can use it to break through the Vorthax lines and strike at their core." Ryan frowned, considering her proposal. "You're talking about reviving something even more dangerous than the megalania," he said finally. "How do you plan to control it?" "I don't know yet," Emily admitted, "but I'm willing to try. We don't have any other options." After a long silence, Ryan nodded. "Do it," he said, "but be careful. If this goes wrong, we're finished." With Ryan's approval, Emily threw herself into the project, working day and night to piece together the fragmented DNA of the Titanoboa. Aaron and Lisa joined her, their grief channeled into determination. They scoured the archives for any scraps of information they could find, piecing together the genetic code bit by bit. It was painstaking work, but they refused to give up. Finally, after weeks of effort, the Titanoboa was ready. It emerged from its artificial womb as a small, writhing mass of scales, but it grew quickly, its body expanding to fill the reinforced enclosure Emily and her team had built. By the time it reached its full size, it was a sight to behold. A sleek, serpentine creature over 50 feet long, with eyes that glinted like polished obsidian. Training the Titanoboa proved to be even more challenging than expected. Unlike the other animals, it showed no interest in forming bonds with humans. Its movements were fluid and deliberate, its instincts driving it to hunt and dominate. Emily tried everything: sound frequencies, visual cues, even food rewards, but nothing seemed to work. The snake ignored her commands, coiling around barriers and snapping at anything that came too close. "It's too wild," Aaron muttered one evening as they watched the Titanoboa slither silently through its enclosure. "We'll never be able to control it." "We have to," Emily replied, her voice tinged with desperation. "It's our last chance." In the end, it was Lisa who suggested a risky solution. "What if we let it think it's in charge?" she asked quietly. "Instead of trying to dominate it, we show it that we're part of its pack. Maybe then it'll listen." Emily hesitated, unsure if the plan would work, but with no other options left, she decided to try. She instructed the handlers to mimic submissive behaviors, lowering their heads and avoiding direct eye contact when approaching the Titanoboa. Slowly, painfully slowly, the creature began to respond. It stopped snapping at them and instead watched them with cautious curiosity. Though it still refused to obey commands fully, it allowed itself to be led toward targets during training exercises. As the days passed, the survivors prepared for the final battle. The Vorthax had regrouped, their forces gathering just beyond the horizon. Scouts reported that the aliens were planning a massive assault, one that would likely overwhelm New Haven completely. If humanity was going to survive, they needed to strike first, and they needed to strike hard. On the morning of the attack, the atmosphere was tense. Soldiers checked their weapons while handlers double-checked the equipment securing the Titanoboa. Emily stood near the massive snake, her heart pounding as she watched it coil and uncoil in anticipation. She knew the risks involved, but she also knew there was no turning back. "This is it," Ryan said as he addressed the team one last time. "We've lost too much already. Let's make sure it wasn't for nothing." The battle began with a deafening roar as the Titanoboa surged forward, its massive body smashing through the Vorthax ranks. The aliens scrambled to retreat, their weapons firing wildly as they tried to bring the creature down. But the Titanoboa was unstoppable, its thick scales deflecting energy blasts as it crushed anything in its path. Behind it, the remaining dire wolves and raptors fought valiantly, their movements coordinated and precise. The Megalania, though, still unpredictable, added to the chaos, tearing through enemy lines with brutal efficiency. Human soldiers followed close behind, picking off stragglers and securing key positions. For a moment, it seemed like victory might actually be within reach. The Vorthax were retreating, their forces scattered and disorganized. But then, disaster struck. A group of elite Vorthax warriors appeared, their weapons far more advanced than anything the humans had faced before. They targeted the Titanoboa directly, their energy blasts piercing its thick hide. "No!" Emily screamed, rushing toward the injured snake. She didn't care about the danger. All she could see was the creature that had given them a fighting chance. Tears streamed down her face as she knelt beside it, placing a hand on its massive head. The Titanoboa let out a low hiss, its obsidian eyes locking onto hers. For a brief moment, Emily thought she saw understanding in its gaze. Then, with a final burst of strength, it surged forward, taking down as many enemies as it could before collapsing. The loss of the Titanoboa was devastating, but it wasn't in vain. Its sacrifice gave the humans the opening they needed to press their advantage. With renewed determination, the soldiers fought harder than ever, their movements fueled by anger and grief. Megan Lewis perched atop a ridge, picked off Vorthax commanders with deadly accuracy, while Jason Cole rigged explosives to destroy key enemy positions. By the time the dust settled, the Vorthax had been driven back. Their forces were decimated, and their leaders were either dead or fleeing. The survivors of New Haven stood amidst the wreckage, their bodies battered but their spirits unbroken. As the sun rose over the horizon, casting a golden light over the battlefield, Ryan turned to Emily. "You did it," he said softly. "You gave us a chance." Emily shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "Not me," she replied. "Them, the animals. They're the ones who saved us." The survivors gathered around the fallen creatures, paying their respects in silence. Shadow, the dire wolves, the mammoth, the Megalania, and the Titanoboa. They had all given everything to ensure humanity's survival. And though their sacrifices would never be forgotten, the road ahead was still uncertain. But for the first time in months, there was hope. The bond between humans and animals had proven stronger than anyone could have imagined, and it had changed the course of the war. As Emily looked out over the ruined outpost, she allowed herself to believe that perhaps, just perhaps, humanity might stand a chance after all.